So today it's easier with technology to start a company than it's ever been before. But in your opinion, is it more challenging to build a successful company, one that actually can last and get some traction in the market and grow?
An awesome question. I think the last 20 years has been the uh, proliferation of technology that has made it easier, as you're saying, to create stuff. And I think maybe at one point, like there's some like I don't know, not mantras, but like sayings, like if you build it, they will come type things that I think in the
Yeah, the field of
past.
dreams.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think in the past it might have actually been true, because you could build something and you were impacting like your region. And so you could send out some flyers, put some ads out, do some cold calling in your region, and you could kind of like hit the ground running. But I think you bring up a great point where, like, now, if anybody can spin up a company in like, I don't know, in like, let's say 2 weeks, you could probably get like your homepage set up on like a no code, like Wix or Foursquare type thing. Then you could probably, if it's software, you can get an MVP out with no code in like another month, and all of this cost you like less than $100. like I think we run into the unfortunate I guess thing of just oversaturation, and kind of what does that
Mhm.
mean for every industry. I mean, it's kind of harder for the industries that are more atom based, but for bits industries, I mean, what's setting you apart really, like from like a HubSpot to like a any other CRM software out there, especially if costs are now going down everywhere, what's really uh, the thing separating you? So I think it's definitely harder. I think, especially because most founders, unless you have a marketing person or you are a marketing founder, distribution ends up being the key. I think the other saying that's now more prevalent is uh, first time founders think product's the most important, and then second time founders know that distribution is the most important. And so I think we're seeing that really come to life, especially with AI. It's so easy to start things that now you need to make sure that you're hitting the mark with your marketing, which I think is probably harder for most founders to do, because most founders don't do the legwork at the beginning to actually hone in and pick a target market to even go after, meaning their marketing is all watered down, their distribution isn't really on, like, zeroed in to be in the right place, right time for their ideal target customer. So hopefully that kind of gives you like my outlook into that question of, is it harder now to be successful?
Yeah. Well, like you were saying years ago, there was a certain way of building a business, and usually it was in a local market, and with that it was difficult, and so there was a certain barrier of entry to get things going, but that also signaled to the customer that there was some effort and there's some thought put into it, so there was some value that you brought into it and you would probably project out to them. And also there was just a lot of constraints, and now that we're going into a world where a lot of those constraints are just gone, you get a bit lost. Like you're saying with the marketing, you don't understand when you're targeting a, let's say, I'm located in a small rural town here in Nebraska. So if you started a physical store selling clothes or whatever like that, you only have certain amount of marketing channels to reach the local people. And so you have a good idea through that constraints of where to go. But if you're all of a sudden now you're targeting the world, where do you start? How do you do those things? Let alone when you're in a local community, you're only competing maybe with a small number of competitors that maybe there's a little overlap. If you're, doing something that's completely original, you shouldn't have much competitors or anything like that. But a lot of times, there's always someone out there who's doing something that you're trying to do better with. Or if you have a good idea, there's always someone who's going to come around and think that they can do it better and try to compete with you there. But in the internet, and especially now today, you're competing with endless amounts of people, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, and we'll say, like, let's say 5 to 10 years, if AI agents become a thing, you're not competing with just the people who are physical and have, are using their keyboards and mouses. You're also interacting and have to fight through the AI noise of, like, I mean, we already see some like sales AI agents being spun up. Like, if you're a salesperson for a company and your competitor just turned on an AI salesperson that's working 24/7, has access to all this pools of data that you as a person can't really manage and deal with like an AI can. Like, how do you compete? Like, so I think that's very uh, valuable question to kind of think about. Yeah.
So, with that being said, why would anyone want to start a startup today, then, Cody?
So I think this is a good question. This is a like I think this is a little philosophical in that why do anything, right? If the in one hand you could say the barriers to
Sure.
doing anything is, extreme, has extreme friction, or you get blessed and your thing has not a lot of friction, and you could just go do it. So why do anything in general? And I think with why I'm such an optimist is that we see a lot of trends where like energy costs being the main grounding cost for most things is decreasing. And if energy costs decrease, that means you kind of start getting access to lots of different things that you wouldn't normally get access to just because the costs are so low. And I think the question then for people in general is, why do you want to do something? And I think the answer mainly is like you're just passionate about it. All right. I mean, like tons of musicians, for instance, like the barrier to entry to becoming a musician is pick up the instrument that you want to start learning to play and just practice. And you do it because it's fun. You get something out of it, and if you get lucky, it can make you money. And I think a business is similar. Most people go into business because they like the game of business, or they're passionate about the mission that they're or thing that they're trying to solve. And I think there's always going to be problems in the world, and whether we as people like it or not, there's always going to be problem solvers in the world. And so I think why build a business? I think it's because you want to, and because in most cases, because there's a problem to be solved, because those are the businesses that are usually the ones that are financially viable business ideas.
Yeah, I love that. I have an idea, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, around the difference between problem solvers and order takers. So this is a big thing for me in the sales world, where you get people who say they're salespeople or they're salesmen or saleswomen, whatever. They say they're good at it. But in reality, they're just order takers. They're not going to a customer actually like understanding the core problem that they're trying to solve with whatever solution that they're trying to buy, and they're not actually bridging that gap to remediate the true issue. So if you come to me and you're just like, I want 5 units of whatever, I'm just taking your order and fulfilling it. But if you're coming to me with a problem and then we work through it together, we actually get a solution that ends up with 5 units of whatever, that's a completely different process. And if you're working in a role, or you're building a company, or if you're doing anything where you're just an order taker, well, you're not providing that much value. And I feel like that's where you're really susceptible to failing, because someone might come in and undercut you, or they might provide better level of service, or they have better connections, or it's an established brand that already has this big reputation. So getting in there as a true problem solver, which is extremely difficult, I think that is one of the measures to make people successful. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a reason why the number one thing, especially in early stage um, venture, when you're like looking at teams and startups, the number one thing you try to find out is they call it like founder market fit, and
Hmm.
specifically like the passion. Why is this founder in this space to begin with, and why are they a good fit here? Because ideas are dimes a dozen, right? There's always like every great idea usually has like at least 5 to 10 people chasing it at the same time at any given moment in time. And the person that is the most passionate, has the most drive, is the one that's going to, like you said, put in that effort to not necessarily undercut, but deliver a service or a product that will resonate really well with their end user, with their customer. And I think that's the piece that like if you have the passion drive, that's the most important thing. I mean, there's other reasons to like why passion is important, because again, like building a business is tough to begin with. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter the size, the complexity. It could be the simplest and smallest business. It's still going to take you a lot of time and effort. And for it to be successful, it's going to take a lot of energy regardless. So that passion is what's going to push you, but it's also going to take you to that next level that's really hard to, compete against if you don't have that passion. So I tell a lot of people who are afraid of sharing their ideas, I say, there's probably at least 5 to 10 other people, like I mentioned, who have your idea. And you should really kind of introspectively think, if you think that somebody random on the street that you're asking for feedback from can beat you at building this idea, that you should take a look in the mirror and really ask, are you the right founder to chase this idea? Because again, if a random person off the street can take your idea and do better than you, how are you going to compete against the actual players in this space that are passionate and are like going at it 110% every single day? So yeah, maybe I'll answer that your question with that.
Yeah, ideas are worth nothing. Everyone has ideas, but it's really hard to do the execution part. And I mean, like we were saying, the AI tools, and maybe we can touch on that here now, since I know that's a big part of what you're doing and it's huge in the zeitgeist right now. Everyone has an idea for a business, but very few people actually act on it. And even then, a small minority of those people can actually succeed within it. And so being scared that you have an idea and it can be taken is kind of a silly thing to worry about. But if you're in a business and you have a lot of competitors who are also have up and running businesses, that's a completely different problem. But I do want to get on AI. So you and I met, about a year and a half ago. I think it was like right when we started the podcast, and you joined us really early on the podcast, which was awesome. So welcome back. Uh, but but yeah, ChatGPT was not even out when you and I met in when we were going through the launch program, and now AI is like the biggest thing in the world. So you've been going through your founder's journey, building your startup, and it's evolving now utilizing AI. So can you kind of give an overview from your perspective of how this landscape has now kind of come in, like how everything's positioning, what's changed in the last year and a half, and how it's impacting kind of the startup world?
Yeah, totally. So maybe I don't know if people have listened to that first episode or not, that we did, that I
I'll
did with
link
y'all,
it. I
but
will put it.
okay. So I'll do like a very short thing of like what we're doing just for context to help shed some
Mhm.
light on like the perspective of how I'm answering this question and where I'm coming from. So for context, so I'm the founder of Founder Way. What we're building is a platform to basically make building and supporting businesses simple, and our end vision is to help someone go from the idea to first customer and beyond, and have an AI chief of staff that is not only telling you like, hey, heads up, and give you notifications on things, but to be able to queue up tasks in the future and say, hey, do you want me to build this or to create this thing for you? You click yes, and it starts building up your marketing assets, starting to code some stuff for you to then review later on. And so with that being the context of where I'm coming from, let me answer your questions in terms of like impact, what we're seeing in the space, how we're seeing people react in the positioning piece, because I think the positioning piece is actually really important. Where um, in the past, every tech revolution allowed for startups who could utilize um, the new technology without having to worry about the old technical debt that incumbents have to worry about, and can jump on that tech and start utilizing it, could take advantage of the innovations of that tech revolution, and just like become huge and grow and surpass the incumbents, or at least catch up. I think what we have here in this revolution is that AI just came out of nowhere, and it's so easy to use and build with that the incumbents can build just as fast as the startups can, but they also can leverage all of their technical debt to actually help them build better, more filled out projects or products. And then they can leverage their distribution channels that already exist to then outmaneuver and outplay startups. So you have this really interesting, almost like inverse relationship or positioning that's occurring now that hasn't happened in past technical revolutions. So a lot of startups now have to try and figure out, how do I become better with and be actually innovative without having to do the incremental change that usually happens, that allows for proliferation of new businesses to form and like come out of nowhere and be successful in each revolution, because now that can't happen. Like you don't have that speed, there isn't that like positioning that you have as a fresh company in this revolution. So I think what we're seeing, especially on like the investor side of things, is that vertical or vertically focused startups are becoming very interesting, because uh, an AI company like OpenAI, for instance, or Google, they're going to build out these tools that everyone's going to take advantage of. But now you have to do the hard thinking of, how do I actually innovate in my vertical to move away from old existing systems that the incumbents can't really change and move away from as easily. And what I mean by that is, like, if an incumbent has a process and it's like slow, has lots of friction, but everything is built around this process, it is extremely hard for that incumbent to move off of that process. It's really easy for them to build tools to try and make that process better. But if at the end of the day, you as a startup come up with a completely new process that is just 10 times or 100x better than the existing processes and systems, whether that's through like giving people access or saving them money, generating more money for people, whatever the thing that makes it better is, you now have that ability to build on that just as fast as the incumbents could. And that uniqueness in the better process basically will help you fight against the leverage that the incumbents can do with their technical debt that they have. That doesn't mean that you'll have a fair game with distribution, but I think that's always been the case with startups. Like, the distribution fight is always the number one fight that you have to do as a startup, because you're brand new and you don't have those channels of distribution established yet. But at least you can try and build quickly now around new processes and ideas. So I think that's kind of like the positioning and the overview of what we're seeing and how markets and things are reacting. You're like, right now you're already seeing a couple of these startups kind of start like shutting down and closing already. Like, think like foundational models are starting to figure out like, hey, we can't build a foundational model without all this data that exists, like Google and Microsoft have access to. So how do we actually compete? And we're seeing a lot of mergers, some, I guess I'd say, higher acquisitions, acquihires
Yep.
starting to happen,
I
like
saw that
with
recently. Yeah.
Microsoft, and I forget the name of the company that they just basically gutted. They just hired the entire team, which is also interesting. This, in terms of policy wise, there aren't really a lot of M&As happening due to just the economic landscape, where big companies are just getting hunted down by like, was it, I think, is SEC the right governing body that goes after like monopolies and like blocks M&As from happening? I think it's FTC. So someone is going to comment like that's the wrong three-letter organization, but that's the point that I'm trying to make. So
Yeah. SEC or the Federal Trade Commission, one of the
or
two.
FTC, one of them. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's FTC. It is FTC.
Hmm.
So like, you're already starting to see it, even though the environment isn't friendly to it. You're already seeing people just buying out entire company, like, just for the tech and the people, so the talent, I mean. So Microsoft just did it, and you're going to see other I think Stable Diffusion CEO just stepped down because he's like, we can't fight centralized other centralized AI as a centralized company, because we don't have the leverage that they have on the data side. So he said some comment about like he wants to build a decentralized AI model to try and fight the centralized model, which is, we'll see where that goes. I think crypto has yet to really find its moment of value. So maybe this is it.
It's a good concept thinking about how to position yourself now. Because when we first heard about AI, we thought, okay, this is just going to be super disruptive. And the small 1 to 5 people company can come in, create a product that maybe some giant company has been sitting on forever with their quote unquote monopoly or position, market dominance that they've had. And they can just disrupt them and outcompete. But over the last few years, as you're saying, or over the last few months and last year or so, as you were saying, a lot of these big players are actually the ones with the advantage because they have not only the infrastructure, the data, which turns out to be one of the the biggest parts, of course, of an LLM, but also the brand recognition, the market dominance, the distribution. They're the familiar commodity. They're the application that's already installed, within another corporation. They're the platform of choice. So having another company or someone go change platforms for this upstart, even though it's maybe cheaper, is way more costly or risky than they're wanting to do. So they can't quite get the traction that we were originally thinking. So again, going back to, if you're starting a company today, what is your advantage, right? So where is it that you should be looking? How should you be positioning yourself so you don't have to come across and then face Microsoft or Google puts some new feature in Gemini that completely crushes your startup?
Yeah. So I kind of touched it in my last answer, but let me flesh it out a little bit because
Yeah.
I think this is super important. So the way we are looking at this, and this might be helpful to kind of anchor this answer to how we look at stuff is we've identified a process in a space that is underserved and has a process that is not, let's say, friendly to the people in it that it's supposed to serve.
Mhm.
Because typically in the startup space right now, we have like, if you're starting a business, if you want help, you got to go to like a boot camp or a consultant. You have to like hire a consultant to come in, or you find a program like incubator, accelerator. But these are all high touch programs, meaning like one to one or like one to a few type programs where it's really hard to scale those up and still retain quality and outcome that like these programs are trying to strive for and these like individuals are striving for. But let's say um, we can use AI to basically compress all of that so that the personalization happens at like kind of like how Khan Academy, their founder, is talking about individual tutors for every single child. What if, like in our sense, every single company has their own personalized strategist, or in other words, their own personalized like Deloitte consultant coming in to overlook what they're doing and trying to find the holes in their business for them? What does like that is like something that's very hard for an incumbent to figure out and change because their processes are so ingrained. Like you,
Mhm.
like a Deloitte would have to literally cannibalize itself in order to roll out an AI consultant. It would like these are like the areas where I think founders should look at and see AI is unlocking such potential for personalization and scalability that like the easy hanging fruit are actually the high touch areas of industries that you can use high tech to basically turn into high scale. So that that's kind of like a mantra I've been thinking about, and people have told me it's been repeated as in other conversations that I've been having. But that's kind of like the big place to look. And if you really wanted like defensibility, find those areas and tie it to data that is fragmented and extremely hard to get your hands on otherwise. So for us, we're trying to figure out business data that is non-quantified data. So think like your challenges of your business, the parts of like the lean model camps, like your strategy, like that stuff is really fragmented and not usually collected by folks. And like your day-to-day activities, for instance, like those things aren't usually collected, and if they are collected, they're not usually tied back to say like metrics. So like, okay, we had this challenge, and during that time period, this was our metrics for our OKRs that we were collecting at the time, and being able to start pattern matching against stuff like that just doesn't exist. So we've identified data that isn't collected but could be very useful, especially now with AI being able to like analyze and find the patterns inside that data if we could collect it, and providing a platform that makes it organic to collect that data. So now not only are we disrupting something that is a high touch area and using high tech to scale it, and helping those in that space to scale as well. I mean, for us, we're partnering with smaller boot camps, consultants, and advisors who can't compete on scale with these larger consultancy shops, and giving them the tools to do it. So that's unlocking value just through that piece. But now, because people are going to be using our platform, we can now collect this data and create a data moat or defensibility with our data that is hard and unique. So I think if I was going to summarize, it's find places where there's not a lot of scalability because it's such high touch interactions or like services that you can now use AI to crack open and make it scalable, and tie that to being able to have data that is proprietary that you can collect and leverage to just keep the ball going, that flywheel building, so that your product gets better and can outcompete the others that are entering the market. And again, that data, that you're on a level playing field. If it doesn't exist, the incumbents don't have it either, right? So you've now you've set the playing field to where you have the advantage, or at least a a head start, because you're looking at it and they're not. So hopefully that answers that question in a nice nutshell.
Where do you think a lot of this AI stuff is headed in terms of reshaping what we think of a startup? So we were talking a little bit before we hit record on the idea that you might have a one person unicorn business, which is, for the listeners who don't know, a unicorn is worth $1 billion. So if you could have a founder who's doing everything himself, utilizing AI tools and stuff like that, potentially making a unicorn, well, that changes the way we think of startups in a lot of ways. So where in your head, where are you seeing things going?
I know there's a bet out there with a bunch of very influential people on when that'll happen, and I think if it does happen, I think I think it's kind of like okay, so there's a story about the guy who I think was like the 4 minute mile or something like that, or like who ran, I think it was like, I think that's what it was. It was this runner,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone before him was like, it's not possible, it's not going to be a thing. And then as soon as that guy did it, like everybody started doing it. And then the same thing, if we kind of look at the unicorn title, yes, 2020, 2021, minted a bunch of them on paper, at least a lot of paper coins, but still, before then, there was very few that could hit that scale. And now there's like hundreds since the unicorn term came about. I mean, I think that's probably like 8 years ago or something when that term came about. So like, let's just say 10 to be conservative. If there's 100 now that are now not papercorns, but like will stay as unicorns, that's like ten unicorns a year. So if for this, if a one person can do it, that means there's now a playbook, and I think more people can do it. But I think the other question around this is, if it's a one person company, I think unicorn is great as a title, but I think the another question to kind of ask, it may be a better question to ask, is what is a successful company or a successful
Mm-hmm.
business? Like, how do you define that? Because unicorns are important because that means you can pay everybody. Like everybody can go home, make nice salaries, and be happy. But if you're a single person team, even let's just say like a 5 person team, and you hit like you know, $1 billion in revenue, like what do you do? Like you split that up, and like, I mean, let's take half of that. For instance, you could put half a billion dollars into your company for R&D and marketing and stuff, and you can put the other half into paying your everybody. And so if there's 5 people, everyone takes home $100 million a year. Like I think the success just becomes a lot easier. I mean, if one person can easily spin up a company to make 100K a year, which would be like a lifestyle business, it for most in terms of categorization, but that's hugely impactful. I like, most people don't make 100K a year. So if it's that easy, if one person can do a billion, that means at least 100 people can do 100K, which then becomes, again, what is a successful business? What is enough? And then I think you start getting into more non-business questions and more philosophical questions. Is, if you're this one man shop and AI is running everything, what do you do with your extra time? And I think that's
Mhm.
kind of an interesting question of where does that go? Does everyone just have a bunch of hobbies now or a bunch of side gigs that, you just spin up multiple companies because you like, I don't know, you're a musician, but you also like the 3D print things and you like to paint, right? So like your businesses get stood up around your hobbies and now you're just kind of putting your creativity and whatever value you can bring out into the world, and that's kind of it. I think there's some really interesting philosophical questions outside of just like what happens next, that again, if energy goes to almost free, I think we unlock a really interesting period in human history which has never been seen before, which is you can have access to anything you want. It can build anything you want for as easy as clicking a button. So I think I don't have the answer, but that's kind of like how I see things and the questions I'm
Yeah.
asking myself, at least with that question.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trick question because clearly no one can predict the future,
Yeah.
nor do we possibly see where it's going. But I just love to see or listen to the thought process, right? And it shows your values. Again, it's not just about building a giant company, but it's about living a fulfilling life. And
Right.
so many times you can get blinded by the potential money or the potential status or different things. And you can fall into a trap of starting a company doing something that you don't enjoy. So one of the things that I'm really excited about with where we are, but also where we're going, and you touched on it, is the ability to iterate very quickly and to test something out very fast and see if it has any market traction and see if it's right for you. And if you're genuinely loving going through the process every day, that's going to be a much more fulfilling journey and a better journey than just, I don't know, having an idea, getting some funding, and slogging it out for 10 years or something, which I have some experience with. But yeah, love it. Well, Cody, I think we're at the end of our time here. Again, thank you so much for joining us again. And where can people find you online?
Yeah, so you could find me online. I think all my social media handles are at Cody S. Jung. And more importantly, if you want to check out what I'm building, it's at Founderway AI or founderway.ai is our URL. So if anybody wants to pop in and take a business idea and try and build on it, happy pop on over and definitely reach out. Happy to mentor and kind of work with you on whatever idea you're building.
Yeah, yeah. If you have any idea, definitely reach out to Cody. He's someone I definitely recommend. Fantastic person, and I'm really excited to be connected with you, man. So again, thanks for joining us, and thank you to everybody who made it to the end of the video. I probably should start saying this at the beginning, but like and subscribe, share if you find any value of that. But yeah, we really appreciate everybody who does listen and everyone who comments and everyone who shares it. So we will see you all next week. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks, Tanner.